So, as of the time recording this, Hellboy currently has an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'll say I have not been particularly excited about it. I'm a fan of the original Hellboy movies. I really, really dig them a lot, in fact. And you think I'd be excited, but I did feel like the original trailer for this reboot, it felt like they were trying to sort of copy the edginess and sort of silliness of Deadpool. I'm like, well, that's not going to work. And I just didn't have a need to have a Hellboy reboot. I didn't see the point. I didn't know how they were going to top Guillermo del Toro. And then I see these super low ratings. It gets me interested. Then I see, I should have known this, but Neil Marshall directed it. And I'm a fan of Neil Marshall. He hasn't done a movie in a very, very long time. For a refresher, he directed Dog Soldiers, which I love and have recommended multiple times on the channel. He directed The Descent, which a lot of people love, and I have recommended multiple times on the channel. And he directed a lesser-known movie that I happen to really dig called Doomsday. All of his movies, super macho, bloody, violent, and they work. They're tied together really well. So when I saw that, I thought, maybe just the first batch of reviewers for the new Hellboy are comparing it to Del Toro's work, and there is no comparison. It's completely different creative ends of the spectrum. And maybe that's why they're giving it such bad reviews, and I'll go review it, and I'll be the one that points out the beautiful things about this movie. And I'm here to report that it pretty much sucks. It's pretty shitty. However, there are some redeeming qualities. I'm going to talk about those because rather than just shitting all over this pretty bad movie, I'm going to try to tell you if it might be for you, because I do think there is an audience out there for this movie. I kind of fit into it. I kind of dug it, but I'm very aware of how bad and how shitty it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the ugly is probably the most interesting part. So this is going to be relatively spoiler-free in terms of the story, but I'm going to ruin the shit out of this movie for you. However, you might actually enjoy watching it a little bit more after watching this review. So what's good about it? Well, for starters, man, this is going to be tough. So it is edgier and bloodier and more graphic and has a more raw edge than the Del Toro version. And those are fairly dark and edgy, but they're PG-13. This one's rated R, so I sort of anticipated that going into it, and it delivered. You see dismemberment, disembowelment. It escalates. If there's not enough for you at the beginning, and there's plenty, it does escalate in a really great fashion. Like, it added to the movie, and I thought it worked out well. I was hoping that it was going to be a little bit more like that, and it definitely was. And ultimately, what you get here, I'm going to touch on this a little bit more at the end, but you get like this kind of cool midnight movie. It actually reminded me a little bit of like Clive Barker, so Hellraiser, Nightbreed, stuff like that. Not as good as those, though, unfortunately, and we'll talk about why. The performance from David Harbour, who plays Hellboy, was good. Now, I'm a fan of Ron Perlman. I almost always like Ron Perlman. I really think he was probably the perfect casting choice for Hellboy. So I'm not comparing the two, but on his own, David Harbour, you know him from Stranger Things, he did a killer job. He did really good. He did a good job sort of bringing you that performance through all of the makeup. That brings me to another point. The practical effects, I'll repeat myself, that'll be important later in this video. The practical effects are really fantastic. There's a bunch of monsters. There's one called the Baba Yaga that really is pretty great. In fact, that whole scene was one of my favorite scenes. It opens up with this really cool house on legs, and then the Baba Yaga sort of moves around in this contortionist fashion. That performer did a really amazing job doing real stuff on screen. There's some really dark elements to that scene, and it's one of the better moments in the movie. It comes kind of late, though. In fact, this movie really took off for me at sort of the halfway point. There were other times in the first half where there's plenty going on. There's actually a lot of action in this movie, which is another great point. But it was not really capturing my attention for the first half. I was really struggling to enjoy it, and then there's sort of a halfway mark where they actually play Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper, and that's where I sort of started kind of getting into the movie, the spirit of this movie a little bit more. Without spoiling anything, there's a sequence that looks like it's from a Black Sabbath song that's super epic. It's way too short, but it's where the movie really started to sort of like make me excited for the potential going forward to the end of the movie. There's a completely unnecessary action sequence after the climax and the conclusion of the story that occurs to a Motley Crue song, and that's what I wanted out of this movie. It's there. It's not just in that one scene, but it's throughout the entire movie, but it's not enough of it to make it work, unfortunately. Now, what's bad? For starters, Mia Jovovich, her performance is maybe even should be in the ugly section of this review. It's a career-ending performance, possibly. She has not been in many movies lately. Do not expect to see her in movies coming up. She way overdid it. Over-dramatic, and it is sloppy. Speaking of sloppy, the way the movie's put together is kind of sloppy too. It's kind of two things at once. So you kind of get, like I said, like this midnight movie thing that's bloody and gross and has monsters and has this edginess to it. But you also kind of get like a mainstream superhero movie, and the two don't mesh together really at all. And even though I'm saying that this is definitively a bad movie, I kind of hate that it's not worse than it is. Had it been worse, we might have a cult classic on our hands. We still might. The jury's still out on that, but I feel like on first impressions, it wasn't quite far enough down that road to really be endearing over time, but it's surprisingly close. So let's talk about the ugly. Remember I said I really focused on the practical effects being one of the strong suits? The computer graphics in this movie, the CGI, is not it's the worst I've seen this century. Let that soak in. This is some of the worst renderings and lighting I've seen in a movie, outside of something that's like really made for like a couple of $1,000s, like something out of something that came out in the theater. It's way worse than anything in the original Hellboy. That movie's 15 fucking years old now. The computer graphics in this are way worse. There are better graphics in the original Jurassic Park than there are in this movie. It's that bad. I'm not exaggerating. A lot of times, either the monster or the gigantic sword, whatever has been rendered into the space, doesn't even look like it belongs in the same room or the same setting. The lighting's off. It's bizarre. And it appears that it's unfinished. And so for a rated R movie, I was actually concerned throughout. I'm like, oh my God, please don't make this. Please, I don't know what the budget is. Please don't let this be $150 million movie. Like we used to have really great rated R action movies in the 90s. They disappeared for over a decade, and we're only just now getting them back with movies like Deadpool. And I'm like praying to the movie gods, please don't let this Hellboy reboot kill rated R action movies. Luckily, from what I can see, it's a $50 million budget. And that may seem like a lot of money. It's significantly less than the original Hellboy. That makes me feel a little bit better. And I'm kind of okay with the shitty graphics now. Kind of. They're pretty bad, though. All said and done, I'm basically just frustrated that the movie that I really wanted is there. Half of this movie is what I would have loved for it to be, but it's so full of holes of just horse shit that it just does. I don't think it works. I am going to give it another shot to see if I can sort of love it, but keep in mind, with me, even if I do love it, I'm going to love it for being a bad movie. The new Hellboy is a bad movie. No way around it. If you don't like, famously bad movies, this is probably not going to be for you. Even if you were a fan of the original Hellboy, I think this might even be less for you. However, what can you do instead? I don't want to leave you here with nothing. You could, by my recommendation, you could watch the original Hellboy. It's currently available on Netflix, at least it is in the US. And I do recommend watching Neil Marshall's Doomsday. Now, it's not available on any streaming service that I can find, but it's going to be cheap enough to rent if you can get your hands on it, or to buy the DVD, and it's well worth a watch. But his first feature-length film, Dog Soldiers, it's currently available on Amazon Prime. So watching that and the original Hellboy is going to be a better double feature than this one, than paying $10, $12 to go see this one in the theater, unfortunately. But I gotta say, if they do make another one of these, I'm gonna go see it. There's enough there that gives me hope that they could actually turn this into something, and they very well might. For a $50 million budget, this is likely going to make its money back. Now, keep in mind, they probably spent twice that on the marketing, but by the time it's out on Blu-ray, there's a chance this makes its money back, and if it's got any sort of a cult following, they'll make another one, and they could maybe do better with it, with the same type of budget. Just, it needs some work, man. This movie is it's a disappointing mess. But if you've seen it and you wanted to see what my thoughts are, feel free. Please let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I would love to see who disagrees with me and why. Because, man, maybe I missed something, but I've tried really, really hard to love this one. If you want to support the channel, you can do so a number of ways. But if you're new here, definitely click that subscribe button and be sure to click the bell icon so you get notified when I put out new videos like this one. And if you've been around for a while and you get value out of the channel, consider becoming a Patreon supporter like one of these people. You can also check out the Amazon link to get maybe that Doomsday DVD. I'll put a deal for one in there if I can find one. And be sure to check out the Flick Connection podcast. I've got new guests. I'm doing more and more episodes. That show's really starting to take off, so be sure to go over there and subscribe to that channel as well. But I will keep making reviews like this as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking this one out, and you will see me on the next one.